First night may have been special, but recruiting at UConn, it never stops. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just like to take a quick moment to ask for a small favor. If you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe. Follow wherever you listen to your audio versions. It really helps the show grow, and I genuinely appreciate your support. Every follow, subscription, download not only helps build our UConn community, but also generates more revenue for UConn NIL initiatives, as we are giving 10% of that revenue to Bleeding Blue for Good. There's also something I'm super excited about. I'm donating 10% of all revenue, so that's 20% total, split between the two entities, to Husky Ticket Project. I'm proud to partner with them to help send kids to games and make a real difference in underserved communities. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me and others. And for my everydayers, a special shout out to you. Really appreciate your support in making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Now, the first night festivities kicked off, and honestly, between the men and the women, Paige Bueckers was clearly the star of the show. In what will be her final first night as a Husky, Paige received the loudest ovation of the evening. I could even tell that through the app, watching it on UConn Plus. She made her way out to half court with her crazy dark blue sunglasses on, which I thought was hysterical, and full of confidence. She hyped up the sold out Gampel crowd. The energy in the arena was electric. You could just tell. I mean, from everything I've heard from folks that were there, to media members, to fans, it was a really special moment. Paige raised her arms in a heart shape above her head, solidifying her connection with the fan base that has really rallied behind her since her arrival at UConn and all through the adversity of injuries. I think she has been so fantastic with media. She kind of felt like this was like a full circle moment. She took the mic and said, to the best fans in the country, just kind of expressing that gratitude. And so she competed in the 3-point contest with her sunglasses still on, which I thought was great. She really has a lot of personality, and I hope it continues as she becomes a pro. And I said this in the men's show. It was really fun to see kind of a real relaxed group of men and women just kind of enjoying one last night before we're, 16, 17 days away from the first game. So first night serves as kind of an annual pre-celebration for what's to come. A first look at the team and a time to rekindle excitement about the upcoming season. However, while the night was filled with celebration, Geno Auriemma offered a more tempered, realistic view, as is the approach of most coaches. And with the season just around the corner, Auriemma was blunt. Kind of the theme of Monday is blunt coaches. There's nothing to be excited about. His remark underscores the current state of the team as they grapple with injuries and a lack of experience. Auriemma highlighted the challenges of integrating new players and overcoming injuries to key contributors like AZ Fudd, Aubrey Griffin, and Caroline Ducharme. But with such a short preseason, UConn's preparation has been limited, and injuries have only added to the complexity of this process. The Huskies roster is a mix of fresh talent, and it's a great opportunity to give the recovering veterans time to come back. But Auriemma admitted that the team's performance has been inconsistent, which is pretty par for the course at this part of the year. Quote from Geno: "When it looks good, it's really good. When it can quickly go the other way." That's a pretty, straightforward answer from him. And I don't expect anything less from Geno. I think he's gotten even more refreshingly blunt as time has gone on. The absence of veterans like Griffin and Ducharme to start the season makes this part of the year an uphill battle. Despite these challenges, you got to like having Ice Brady and Jana El-Elfi to kind of give this team hope, showing promise with their early season performances. I mean, even joking around in the scrimmage, you could see that Jana can really stroke it from deep. I mean, she's shooting threes. I really have I don't have as many concerns. That being said, I am not a Hall of Fame coach who's the greatest women's basketball coach of all time. So, Geno, as many concerns as you want, we will adhere to them. But as a fan, I don't have as many because I think it's mostly about being cautiously optimistic. But I've spotlighted Caitlin Chen most of the offseason. Auriemma did the same. The graduate transfer is a player who's really kind of finding her footing and as a voice of one of the team's leaders. I think coming in, you have this huge star in Paige Bueckers, but you have to have leadership beyond her. And I think Chen's progress could really make a significant impact for this team. And I think she truly is the key. It's one of the reasons why I did an entire show on her. But with less than 1 month to prepare until the season opener, I think we're at 17 days until September 7th. The Huskies have a lot of work ahead. Auriemma's realism might seem harsh to some, but to be honest, it's clear that UConn is taking steps to building up the team in the preseason versus the expectation being national championship or bust. We can talk about it on this show every day as we do, but the reality is, as you're waiting for some of your veterans to come back, this is going to be about building chemistry with those who you probably didn't expect to start or to get a ton of minutes. Sound familiar to last season? Yes. But again, the optimism remains because as long as you have Paige Bueckers, the face of the team, who enjoyed her final night in front of the fans for her first night, she knows that there's a lot that lies ahead. And the expectations of Husky Nation are great. That being said, the future is bright. UConn's 2025 recruiting class. First night, huge event, but some were in town to kind of take it all in. Let's start with Kellis Fisher. She's a 5'8" guard from Maryland who now plays at IMG Academy down in Florida. ESPN has ranked her as the 28th best prospect in her class. She committed to UConn as a sophomore way back in January of 2023. It's always a good sign when a player commits that early. It shows she's bought into the program and what Geno is building here. Fisher's game is super versatile. She's got that gritty all-around play style that UConn loves in its guards. She can shoot, pass, defend. She does it all. The question is, will she be more of a scoring guard or does she settle into a playmaker role once she's here? Either way, she's a huge part of what the Huskies are trying to do moving forward. And for the fans, should be excited to see her in the backcourt in the next couple of years. Next up, with someone that we profiled because her story is incredibly interesting, Gandhi Malu-Mamel. Now, this is one of the more interesting stories because Gandhi is a 6'5" post player from Ireland. She's currently living in New Jersey, and she didn't even start playing basketball until she was 12 years old. If you watch this show, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Talk about the journey of her family from the Congo to Ireland, and then now Ireland to New Jersey with Kieran Quinn, who we're hoping to get on the show. He's reached out, and we're going to potentially try to get something going for that to kind of talk about her journey. But back in July, she's climbed her recruiting rank all the way up to number 72, and I think you're going to see exactly why. She is a rim runner. She's got incredible skill sets. She is as fast as can be, and she's got the size that you can teach a lot of post moves to. And she is already working on her game, but I think, as we've profiled and chronicled on this show before, which is it's incredibly difficult to learn Geno Auriemma's system as a post player. So, but she has the skill set, the talent, and I'm excited about that signing, probably more than any of it, just because of her story, but also because the coaching staff clearly sees something special in her. And finally, we did another profile on Blanca Quiñones. Blanca is a bit of a mystery for most fans, but she's not to us. She's from Ecuador. She's been playing in Italy's top league. She's a Series A1, which is the highest league of that area. She's got professional skills. She's a wing with incredible size and speed. She has a phenomenal athleticism. She wasn't able to make it to first night, but because of probably some logistics coming over from Europe, but she's already signed on to join the Huskies. She's committed just a couple of weeks ago. And Geno and I can guarantee you Geno is excited, but I am super excited about Blanca because I think she's going to be a huge part of UConn's plans moving forward. I think she's their next star. Coming up after this, let's talk about what is next, UConn's remaining targets in the recruiting trail after this. Hey, Husky fans, let me tell you about Z-Biotics, the world's first genetically engineered probiotic that helps you feel better in the morning after a night of drinks. It is created by PhD scientists to tackle those rough mornings. And here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut, not dehydration. ZBiotics produces an enzyme that breaks down that toxic byproduct, so you wake up feeling your best. I could have definitely used ZBiotics after watching the Yankees Game 7 clincher the other day. At 43, tequila is not my friend, but maybe next time I'll make ZBiotics my first drink of the night and wake up feeling refreshed. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code lockedoncollege at checkout for 15% off your first order. And don't worry, ZBiotics is backed by a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're not satisfied, you'll get a refund, no questions asked. That's zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege for 15% off your first order. So what's left on UConn's remaining targets list? Let's go over it quickly. UConn's 2025 class already shaping up nicely, as we just talked about, with Fisher, Malou Mamel, and Quinones. But the staff isn't done yet. Not so fast, my friends. The Huskies are finalists for 2 more top-tier prospects, Agot Maker and Lara Somfai. And I'll tell you, and let me tell you, adding either of those players would take this recruiting class to the absolute next level, if not 2 levels above. Let's start with Maker. She's ranked number 4 overall in the 2025 class, and she's the type of player who could come in and make an immediate impact. We're talking about an elite talent here. She's a 6'2" forward who can do it all. Handle the ball, score inside and out, and lock down people on defense. She's got UConn on her final list, but it's not going to be easy. I'm going to say some names, and the last name is the only one I feel like you have to worry about. People on her list: Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, and South Carolina. They're all in the mix. Of those 4, I'll give you one guess as to who we should worry about, because she fits the exact profile that South Carolina looks for in a player. Above average for her position at size. Above average size for her position, pardon me. Elite athleticism. Positional versatility. She can play inside or out. Not to say North Carolina, Kentucky, and Duke don't have good programs. But let's face it, when it comes to a recruit of this caliber, it's really going to come down to South Carolina and UConn. But Maker hasn't sent an official visit to UConn yet, but if Geno can get her on campus, I think the Huskies have a great shot. This battle is going to be fierce, because just like UConn does on the men's side, South Carolina could do that on the women's side and say, hey, we've won the most recent titles. You don't want to go to a program that's, I mean, I don't believe this, but this is something that I feel like programs are probably saying about UConn. Their injuries up there. They're on the decline. You want to be with a team that's on the upside. You don't want to go to that UConn program that's all about the players of the past. I guarantee you that's being said. In fact, I know it's being said. So it's going to be a battle. But UConn has a real chance, obviously, because no matter what people say about UConn on the recruiting trail, they're always going to be the greatest basketball program in the country of all time. So that one's something to watch, because I feel like if we can get her away from, not only just to get her in the mix, but to keep her away from the Gamecocks, that's a coup in itself. Then there's Lara Somfai. She's currently ranked number 23 in the recruiting rankings. She's a very interesting prospect. She's a 6'3" forward from Australia. She's already took her official visit to UConn back in March during the NCAA tournament. According to sources, it's really down to UConn and Stanford for Somfai. But Stanford seems to be the favorite right now. And I don't know this for sure, because I tried to look into it as much as I possibly could. But I think it's probably about the pipeline that Stanford has had over the history of landing top international talent. Not to say UConn hasn't, because we have a long list, and we actually did a whole segment on it, pretty much a whole show on it a couple weeks back. But could have something to do with academics as well. UConn's a great school, but no one's going to compare it to Stanford. But I don't think you can count UConn out, especially with the history of international players that have succeeded under Geno. If UConn can close on Somfai, she'd fit in perfectly with other commits. If you get a chance, go look at her YouTube clips. She's actually an incredibly athletic 6'3" inside out game. I think she would probably play the wing. I don't even think she would be a forward on this team. a power forward. I think she would be a 3. But I think she's a dynamic, versatile front court player. But, man, she would fit really nicely into that mix. So for Somfai, it's UConn or Stanford. For the gal from South Australia, I really hope that it's the Huskies. So while Fisher, Malu Mamel, and Quinones are locked in, keep an eye on Maker and Somfai. If UConn can land even one of them, this class in 2025 will be the number one class in the country. If they get one of those, I think they're the number one recruiting class. And if I had to have one of the two that are remaining, I think I would take Maker. I think I would take Agot Maker over Somfai. But if Somfai comes over Maker, then I'd be just as happy. But I think if you had to make me choose, I just want that defensive, gritty that can do everything, can score for you. But her calling card is going to be about the ability to shut people down. When we return, sneak peek into the recruiting class of, 2027. Remember I said at UConn, recruiting never stops. And they don't stop when we're looking ahead. That coming up. Need last-minute tickets, whether it's for UConn basketball, concerts, or any live event, Game Time has you covered. With Game Time, you can find the best deals, more seats, score seats after the game starts, and see exactly where you'll sit before you buy. Forget the stress of planning in advance. Game Time makes it easy to grab your tickets for fast and hassle-free. Download the Game Time app now and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's Game Time. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. To close out the show, let's just do a quick overview. We talked about Paige and her last first night as a Husky. The tenor of the evening is all about relaxing and kind of one last deep breath to talk through expectations for the season. Geno threw some cold water on things, which is what coaches do. We did a whole show about the first beginning of the men's show, talking about how Dan Hurley essentially told fans at a breakfast luncheon that he doesn't like this team yet. So for Geno to say the things that he said, which is to the respect of, there's nothing to be excited about. Could there be two more perfect people to work together, work side by side as a men's and women's athletic department in programs? I think they're like a match made in curmudgeon heaven. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I love Dan and Geno. But they really do kind of give you the real. They tell you that this is going to be a difficult process. It's not as easy as we can make it look. And for the UConn women, the standard is the standard of championships. So when we talk about that, it's really difficult for people to kind of go, well, why is he being so blunt about how he thinks that they're not a full, because it's October 21st and their first game is November 7th. It's gonna take a little while, but the best thing I can tell you is that they're working towards, if this season doesn't end the way that they want it to get the recruits that are going to follow up this class of Paige and AZ and others to reclaim the throne. And we have 3 really top quality recruits. They're in the mix for 2 more of this season, but that doesn't stop there. And it really kind of is an interesting piece, and we'll talk about it here, is we're taking a peek into 2027. Yeah. And talking about Lauren Hassel. And if you don't know that name, you should start to find it, because she's a 6'3" forward from Clarksville, Tennessee. She's already making waves in the recruiting world, even though it's still a couple years away from college. Hassel was at first night. And this wasn't her first time attending. She was here last year as well. So clearly UConn has made a strong impression on her, and it's a commitment that I think they're both looking forward to making. Hassel's got UConn in her top 12 schools, which is crazy to say. But this is how these kids do it these days. They break it down from 12 and they go to 4. But I think UConn is making Lauren a very high priority. And it's easy to see why the Huskies are high on her list. She's got great size, moves incredibly well for her position. She has the potential to develop into a key player in the future. She's also been posting on social media about UConn. So that's always a good sign. But recruiting is a long game, and with a player like Hassel, who's still young, anything can happen because they can change their mind on a whim. Still, if UConn can stay in your ear and keep bringing her back to Stores, they've got a shot at landing another top forward in a couple of years. It's interesting to see UConn already making moves for 2027 because it really does show. Like, I know Geno is an older guy, but him and his staff are not slowing down with this stuff. They're recruiting everywhere. Recruiting never stops. And while we focus on the 2025 class, it's great to see the Huskies building relationships with the next wave of talent, because I think what they're trying to do eventually is, and this is not on purpose, Geno will eventually step down as coach, whether that's at the end of his contract, whether it's before it, but to continue to kind of build these relationships with players like Lauren Hassel, who could be a future UConn frontcourt player. It's exciting to see how her recruitment plays out over the next few years. I think what's interesting to me is that Geno and staff are creating these relationships, knowing that with no pretense of, well, maybe when I'm done, there could be another, Christine Daly could take over. Because I feel like that's a package deal. Once he retires, I think she goes too. Because I think I can't imagine. I have no idea how old she is. I don't want to age her because that's disrespectful. But I do think that with an aging staff, I think sometimes it's difficult to bring in the new generation of players, even though you have that UConn logo, on your chest. They're going to be there for 3 or 4 years. Are you? I think that's the biggest question that they have as we look, take a glimpse forward to 2027 and beyond. But the UConn women's season is fastly approaching. I think we're excited about the upcoming season. I think we're excited to see about where things go. The first game is November 7th against BU. It's home. It's at the XL Center, November 7th at 7 p.m. So go get your tickets if you haven't. I think it's sold out. But again, cautious optimism. I think this team has all the tools to be a national champion, but it's going to take some monumental efforts from freshmen that we don't have a lot of intel on, other than that they're pretty damn good, or else UConn wouldn't recruit them. But I will say, of the three, I thought Sarah was fantastic in first night. She had some bombs out there. I know they're not playing any defense, but the range of these kids now is it's silly. Ali Zabal, just what she make, like 15, 17 in a row at one point in that 3-point shootout. I think those two, Morgan Shelley, Caitlin Chen, those 4 newcomers, 3 freshmen and a transfer. Nothing against the returning folks. If those guys develop this team, then Geno's nothing to be excited about, quote, will be a fun one to come back to and say, you're right, there was nothing to be excited about. But there is now, because we're playing for a national championship. So I think that is what we can look forward to. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm Mark Zanero, asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and to remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. And that's our goal every day here at Locked On UConn. Thank you, Geno Auriemma, for me co-opting that quote. Go Huskies.